As I was talking the other day in my wild edible lecture, often 3 oval leaves get confused for 3 heart-shaped leaves, and you can't really see these because they're tiny, but they're on the end here. Both edible plants, clovers are of course the good blood purifiers. Wood sorrel, really good for hepatitis, tons of iron, good for any kind of urinary tract infections. Sorrel tastes slightly lemony, so I invite you to notice that it has 3 heart-shaped leaves, and it tastes like lemon. That's enough of a characteristic, yeah? So you're walking through the woods, or through the bush, sorry, and you see 3 heart-shaped leaves. Plop a little bit in your mouth, and if it's sour, 100% sorrel. Now those leaves are really tiny. What if you walk through the woods and you see kind of heart-shaped leaves? There's 3 of them. Well, guess what? That's a common identifying characteristic of sorrel, that they have 3 heart-ish shaped leaves at the top of a long stem. You could do the same thing. You could put it in your mouth, see if it's sour. And if it's sour, it's sorrel. Make sense? So sorrel is in the dock family, and the dock family is huge. So all sorrels are docks, vice versa. You can use that interchangeably. But yeah, we'll look at that down the line. So clovers do not taste sour. They have 3 oval leaves. They have tiny little crescent shapes on some of the leaves. What did I tell you to do next time you saw a clover? Anybody remember? Look for the little serrations, right? So when you come over to clover, I want you to pick up a leaf and look for the tiny little spikes on the edges of the leaf. Yeah, you're going to look right over there. Purslane is a ground cover. So sometimes we don't just look at the leaves, right? Or the way the plant grows. I mean, that's good, but also the relationship of the plant to the ground. Some plants grow straight up, some plants sprawl along the ground, and purslane does just that. This is called pigweed also. Sprawls along the ground. It has red stems. Kind of has the lamb's quarters of the fat hen thing going on, where it's slightly waxy on the bottoms of the leaves. And if you taste this, it kind of has a slightly lemony but more slimy taste. Tastes very nice. You'll all get to like try a little piece. Dandelions literally come in all shapes and sizes, although this shape is pretty similar, or the size anyway. But there's over 300 varieties of dandelions, and all of them are edible. There's no poisonous dandelions, no poisonous lookalikes. Some of them have these really toothy leaves and red stems. Some of them have white stems and aren't toothy at all. Of course, if it wasn't fall here, we'd see little flowers. And that's the easiest way to identify dandelions, or their little puffballs. But most people, raise your hand if you're kind of familiar with the shape of the leaves of a dandelion. Raise your hand. Good. Here's something you may not know. All true dandelions have a really smooth stem. So if you flip over the leaf and run your finger along the stem, it's really smooth. Versus this, which kind of looks like a dandelion. I call this cat's ears, but if you run your finger along the stem, it's hairy. Yeah? And in fact, dandelions, when you break their stems, there's that white milky sap in them, yeah? Cat's ears doesn't have it. Uh-huh.
So obviously that white milky stuff is not poisonous, as we've already told.
I don't know where that came from, but the white milky sap is not poisonous. Those really good bitters that come from dandelion, which is essentially the sap, really good for cleansing your inner organs, and we need that bitter taste in our diet. You know, as we get softer and as we kind of degrade as a society, we don't like the taste of bitter anymore unless it's bitter chocolate. But the bitters stimulate all kinds of saliva, they help digestion, and we need a certain amount of bitterness in our diet. One way to get rid of the bitter is to eat the smaller leaves. The smaller the leaves, the less bitter they are. You could also process them with a little bit of fat, which means blend them with a little bit of nuts, or eat them with avocado, or maybe eat them in a salad with a little bit of oil. It's one way to do it. For this reason, I often make dandelion pesto, where I do some pine nuts, some basil, and some dandelions. Or just even skip the basil, it's good with just the dandelions. Or if you don't want to do the nuts or the fat, green smoothie. Boom. And over time, you'll notice if it's overly bitter, over time, if you ease into it, you'll slowly start adding more and more and more, and over time, you'll just like it. Yeah. Like I can eat dandelion straight now, and it's bitter, but I enjoy it. Cat's ear is not actually the same as dandelions. It looks very similar. It has the same kind of rosette at the base. It even has flowers that look really similar. They're yellow. But dandelions have one stalk and one flower per stalk, whereas cat's ears have a more fibrous stalk and they have numerous flowers per stalk.
But it's still edible.
It's still edible, yeah. This is, a lot of people steam this. It's a pretty good herb for soups. Generally, people don't eat it raw because you'll feel it's really fuzzy. Sometimes it kind of creeps down your throat and it's like, ooh, what just happened? But in smoothies, it's really good. And then the last dandelion lookalike that I was able to find, it's called Thistle. You'll notice that these stems are kind of smooth because it's a baby, but as it matures, it'll actually start developing spines or hairs. And the other key thing that tells me that it's not a dandelion is look how unique the leaves are. Yeah? It's got this big lobe, two like little ears. And eventually the stem will keep growing and the leaves will grow around the stem and kind of curl almost. This also has milky sap. It's really good for you. This is the origin of lettuce. So thousands of years ago, this is what we called lettuce or cod. Remember my story when I was talking about how somebody was walking around perhaps and really tired of eating bitter stuff and then found a sweeter version of this, took the seeds, planted it over and over again. So from this, we now have romaine lettuce and red leaf and green leaf. So we talked about chickweed quite a bit. This one is the one with the hairline. Might be a little bit difficult to see because it's moist and the hairs are really delicate, so when it's wet they stick to the stem. But as it dries you'll see tiny little hairs, and if you look at the main stem, they start alternating. That's that plant. It has the tiny white flowers. Chickweed comes in different shapes and sizes. There's many different types of chickweeds. Somebody was pointing out that on my app it didn't quite look like the picture, but again, if I wanted to make an app that was like covered everything, it'd probably take 10 years. And it would be overwhelming because you'd click on something like chickweed and you'd get 100 different photos. But the characteristics are all there. If it has the alternating hairline, a leaf pattern where they grow from the same point in the stem, right? So like a symmetrical leaf pattern, right? Some plants have a stem that grows and a leaf jets out and it alternates, whereas chickweed has leaves that come off from the same spot on opposite directions. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then chickweed also grows kind of like this, like really close to the ground in patches. So I had some awesome helpers today who meticulously picked it for you guys. But you can just literally come with scissors and just snip it off, and then it goes pretty quickly. So definitely try that guy. And it kind of tastes more earthy, but it's really, really good for you.
When you're starting to put these herbs in your smoothie, how much would you put in to start off with?
What I would do is, religiously, if I'm trying a new plant, I never make a smoothie out of it. I always try it first. But when I get to the smoothie part, depending on the green. Like dandelions are really bitter, so maybe I put a little bit. Chickweed is really mild, so I'll just put heaps and heaps in. Clovers, probably on the medium side. It could be too strong if you throw a lot in. Clovers are kind of in the pea family, yeah? We have a bunch of different types of grass here. All of it is edible. If you don't believe me, you ate it in your smoothie yesterday. We blended up some wheatgrass and you ate it all, so I'm guessing you enjoyed it. We'll look at some different grass and I'll actually teach you how to eat it raw because it is pretty fibrous, and if you just chew it up and swallow it, it might be hard to digest. So you can actually get in here and actually look at some of the tender parts, the tendrils, and kind of pick it apart. And it's, it's pretty picky eating, but in a pinch, it'll actually nourish you. We have two awesome plants. This is cultivated amaranth, and this is fresh, green, wild amaranth. Green amaranth. So you can see what happens from this to this, yeah? And humans over time kind of engineered this to produce way more seeds because that's what they were after. And no doubt the seeds are nutritious, they have a lot of omega-3s, but this little guy is going to pack way more of a punch. So this whole week we've been seeing the benefits that green smoothies have been doing, and we've been using really good organic greens but not wild edibles. If we started a green smoothie class with wild edible greens, I don't even know what would happen. We'd probably just transcend. So, another question I had yesterday was like, how do I know how big it is? Or maybe in your app you should put a ruler to see scale, and I think I'm going to actually do that for some plants, but it's difficult to say for others because this is how it starts, and then it gets taller than me. So you really just got to learn what to look for and study it for yourself, and then use books and apps or whatever as kind of a reference for your memory. It has generally reddish purple stems, and if you look really closely, they almost have like grain in them, like a wood grain. I should say that green amaranth does have kind of a poisonous look-alike. And they're usually the nightshade family. They kind of look like tomato leaves. Sometimes when they're babies, the leaves look almost identical. But nightshades have one huge characteristic difference. They're hairy. Hairy nightshade, deadly nightshade, poisonous nightshade.
They have a distinctive smell to the leaf.
They have a distinctive smell. And then if they have a flower and a berry, you can tell right away the flowers are generally purple and they have what looks like a small little tomato. They have really horrible names like deadly nightshade. They're not actually that poisonous. If you ate some, you might feel a little bit nauseous, but it's not going to kill you. But just to be aware. Also, amaranth has these seeds, and you can actually, this is your magnified version of this. Look at where the seeds grow. How they kind of grow at the top, and then from under the leaves they start getting so bountiful that they'll actually start hanging a little bit. This is a sweet potato vine. And this is kind of a new one for me. I didn't really know that you could eat sweet potatoes until I talked to the farmer lady. They're very delicious, very tasty. You have to kind of be careful with vines and make sure you know what you're doing. But generally, if you're on a farm, like if I saw this out in nature, I might not go out there and eat the vine just because at this point I don't totally feel comfortable identifying it. But I just wanted to bring it and show it to you guys how it grows. It's great to consult with farmers because they're like wild edible experts without knowing it. Because they're out there 12 hours a day weeding. So maybe even connect with some local farmers and say, hey, can I come help you weed someday? And little did they know you're actually going to school. We got some bracken fern.
You can eat that? Do you eat that?
Well, I don't eat the leaves. The leaves are pretty fibrous. They have a lot of... You definitely don't want to eat the leaves. Basically, a lot of people can cook with them, but cooking with them depletes their nutrition as well as their toxins, right? The parts of ferns that you eat are the little fiddleheads in springtime. They shoot out of the ground, and when they're still curled and not hairy, that's what you eat. A lot of Asian cultures use them. If you're going to eat ferns raw, I advise that you don't do it every day. So what we were talking about with alkaloid poisoning or accumulating alkaloids that are to an unhealthy degree, it happens much quicker with ferns. So if I were just out walking around and I found some ferns, I would harvest them and I'd have a nice dinner. I'd maybe marinate them in a salad or, I don't know, put a little bit in a smoothie. But then I would take a few days break. I wouldn't do it every single day. So it's something to be done sparingly. The other part of ferns that's edible is like the tubers, the roots. And most of the roots of these plants are edible, but I generally don't go there because A, they're not as nutritious, B, they're usually not as delicious, C, they require a lot more preparation, and D, they kill the plant. And I kind of feel like I'd rather just take a little bit from here, take a little bit from here, and keep going and let the plant either share itself with other creatures or just keep growing. You'll see that the leaves unravel, right? So this kind of grows up as one stalk, and all of the leaves are raveled up, and it looks just like a fiddlehead. Yeah. We have some dock over here, which is also could be called sorrel. And dock is a common characteristic is that the leaves will start curling at the edges. Yeah? And I invite you to... Quite nice. Sour. Kind of like amaranth, dock will also develop seeds at the top of the plant, and they look actually pretty similar. Those seeds are really high in omega-3s as well. I've often, when I make flaxseed crackers, like from our recipes, I take the lazy man's alternative, where I don't even husk the seeds of wild edibles. I just throw in like a handful into a batch, and I feel like, you know, I'm just getting the extra fiber. So. And then we have daisies. All daisies are part of the sunflower family. All sunflowers are edible. No poisonous ones. The flowers are edible, the stems are edible. These leaves of daisies are kind of, I consider them to be like wild rockets, yeah? They kind of have a little bit of a nice bite to them. Certain daisies more than others, but I invite you to plop one of those in your mouth. Sorry, I'm kind of being rude, I'm like munching, kind of got carried away here.
You're at your buffet.
Yeah, exactly. All mints. The mint family is huge. All mints have a square stem. We're aware of that, yeah? So notice this stem. It doesn't smell like mint because there's a lot of different types of mint. But when you come over here, notice how square this stem is. And also notice the grow pattern. You got the two leaves that are growing off the same exact place. You got the little flowers in between that, and you got these tiny little, they call them sepals. They're like the capsules that the flower grows out of. They're the green leaf under the flower petals. So, square stem, alternating leaves, sepals, flowers. That's kind of good to know because there's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different mints out there. All of them are edible. The last thing I want to say before we go on a little walk is that wild edibles also present us with a wonderful opportunity to slow down. If you just look out there and you're like, I don't see any food, but look at how much I found. And this is like an hour's worth of scavenging. Right? If I lived here and took a day or a week, I bet I could find 3 times as much at least. I went to this wild edible workshop one time in the States, and the lady was like, You need to pick clover for a salad. And it was kind of a desert environment. There was some green grass growing, but I was like, where do you expect me to get it? And she's like, well, go find it. And I was just so frustrated. I walked around for 45 minutes and I had no idea. I was like, Erin, where the hell is Clover? We're not eating salad. And she said, come here. She says, slow down, maybe get down, crouch down, and really look. And when I made myself slow down and I crouched down and I looked at the grass, there's like millions of clovers. They were just right there the whole time, hiding, and not really hiding. They were there the whole time, I just wasn't noticing them. So, to me, wild edibles present the awesome opportunity to really look at what's happening on a microscopic scale. It's like, you know, why do we appreciate art so much? Because one reason, in my opinion, an artist looks at a pear and paints it, and he lets us see what he saw after 300 hours of looking at a pear. Now, who in their right mind, which one of us would look at a pear for 300 hours? But we could see in his painting, or in her painting, what that looks like. So, wild edibles kind of give us that same thing to some degree. Hey you guys, so these are cattails, and how do we know? Pop quiz.
They look like a cattail.
Yeah, because they have those seed pods. That's a dead giveaway that they're cattails, yeah? Before this part turns brown, it's green. It's really delicious. It's like corn on the cob. You can marinate it. And it actually comes on the cob already because the spike is very firm. And you can just eat it right off the spike. This you don't really want to eat. It's really cottony. But if you're ever cold, you can stuff it in your clothes or in your sleeping bag, and it's really good insulation.
When it's still green, can you eat that cottony stuff?
Yeah.
Not cottony.
Cattails, we already know have that cottony head, yeah? That's one great way you'll never confuse them. If they don't have a cottony head, they could look like water irises, and water irises, I hesitate again to say are poisonous, but aren't recommended for food. The distinction is that cattails grow like an onion, they kind of grow around each other, whereas irises fan out, yeah? So we'll demonstrate that further. See, it kind of has that circular thing, meaning that the leaves are growing like an onion around each other. If you take it off long enough, you'll actually get to a nice tender part, and you just chop this up into a salad. It's really delicious, really nutritious, high in calories. In this day and age, we don't really think that's a good idea or a good thing, but when we lived in nature, we had to conserve our calories. We really didn't want to chase anything down if we thought we were going to lose, because that could literally be the end of us. We deplete all our calories and then we're done. This is a really good viable source for calories, so good energy food. And these, of course, make really good fibers. They make amazing baskets out of them. You kind of have to peel more than you think, but at the very bottom, there's a super duper tender part.
Tastes like?
And see if I can't get a couple more.
Tiny bite.
See, these are kind of all small. You want to look for the really big, thick ones.
No, it's good.
It's really slimy. That slime is like aloe gel. If you're ever sunburned, it's really good for your skin. It like tones it, alleviates burns, nicks, cuts. Also has antiseptic properties, so you can disinfect with it. This one goes back there. Ta-da!